Hi guys, Stephen here, and for those of you who have been on my channel over the last year or so, you may have noticed my particle videos. Now, ever since I posted these, I've been inundated with messages and replies asking me for tutorials on how I made these effects. And I know it's long overdue, but I finally have some time outside of work and uni to do some tutorials for you guys. So, with that in mind, let's get started. Now, for this tutorial, you're going to need two things. A copy of Maya 2013, or basically any copy of Maya from 2012 onwards. And the second thing you're going to need is the Krakatoa renderer. Now, you can get a trial of Krakatoa from the developer's website, thinkboxsoftware.com. But you have to contact sales and ask them for a license and all that stuff. It's not very hard, it just takes a bit. Anyway, this tutorial will be split up into two sections. The first section will be going over how to create the actual particle effect using the standard Maya particle system. And in the second tutorial, we'll be going over the settings for Krakatoa, getting lighting looking correct, and eventually you'll be able to get a nice particle effect, a bit like you're seeing here, hopefully more flashy though, and a decent looking render, kinda like this. There you go. So, first thing we want to do is to start a new scene. Don't need this. And what we're going to do first is create some geometry for our particle effect to emit from. Now, depending on what sort of particle effect or shape for your particle system you want, will be dependent on what it's being emitted from. So, just for the tutorial's sake, I'm going to make a simple star shape, because I think that might give us a nice effect. So I'll create a cylinder, just put it in shading mode, and probably I'm going to need about 5 points. Bear with me for a second. I'll just make this a little lower, and then I'll extrude the faces out. Keep those together, make them small, and extrude out. And just for so I'm going to merge these points together. Now for our particular particle system, I'm going to have all the particles emit from each individual vertex or vertex. So we should have 17 emission points, which should give us a nice effect. So now we have that, we'll delete our history by edit, delete by type, history. And we'll freeze the transformations as well. Freeze transformations, whoops. There we go. So next thing we want to do is name our shape, we'll just call it P_emitter, and Krakatoa can't actually render geometric objects by default, or at all actually, but just for the sake of it, I'm going to turn off all the render stats. So that should work. And now just save the scene. Call it something simple. Let's call it party time. Alright, next thing we want to do is select our geometry and go into the dynamics rollout, particles, emit from object with the options. I'll give the particle system a name. It's called party. We'll just call it party. Basically want to emit from the surface, which would be every particle on it. And just for performance wise, we'll call it to 200. And we can change all of these other attributes as we need them, but for now we'll just hit apply. And now if we go to our timeline down here, we want to put the amount of frames in a scene to about 300, which gives us a decent playback range. And if we scrub the timeline, you can see particles being emitted from the surface of the geometry, which is exactly what we want. And you can see, probably do with some more emission there. So if we go into the attribute editor and select our particle system, not the geometry, so we have this box around it, go to Party 1 emitter and bump up the emission rate to 2000. And that's better. Now I'm just going to do a quick test render with Krakatoa to see how it looks. In fact, it'll probably come out black. Yep, but our alpha channel sees all the particles, which is exactly what we want. So for now, we don't need to use that. Next thing we want to do is add some deformers to our particle effect. So we want to select our particles again, and right now we'll add a turbulence, and we'll see what that does. You can see it's slightly altering it. Just bump up the magnitude to about 50. Just change up some of these settings so we'll see what we can get. Now it's a bit more random. Probably go even lower with the frequency. 5. Yeah, that's better. That gives us a nice sort of turbulent shape. Actually quite nice to look at. Just try another test render. See, even already it's looking a lot better. But we want to get a bit more randomness out of the shape, so we're going to animate our base object so the particles animate with it. So we just select our object, press S to set a keyframe, and scroll all the way to the end of our timeline, and we'll just do a quick movement of it, like that. And maybe we'll do a bit of scaling as well. So I'll just set the keyframe, drag it to the middle, let's make it smaller. There we go. It's kind of a cool shape. And now we'll just set some rotation. And do that. And I'll just do that again. There we go. Alright, so that should be all the animation on the shape we need, since we're just doing a simple animation. Now we don't need to play with that anymore. So go into our channel editor. We're going to, with the geometry selected, we're going to hit the create new layer and assign selected object, and we'll just hit that to reference and turn off the view. So now we only have our particles showing, which is exactly what we want. Now, with our turbulence, I'm going to move it to around the center of where our particle effect is, and we'll go into the settings again. Now, with the distance, I generally leave the max distance off because I want the turbulence to affect the entire particle effect without any fall off. And in the volume control attributes, I usually set to sphere, and oops. And we'll just scale up the sphere until it envelops the entire particle effect. There we go. Now I'll go into the actual particle itself and we'll change some settings around to make it look a bit better. For example, we should change up the speed, maybe set it to 3.5 and add a random 1 unit of speed randomness, and we'll put the tangent speed to 0.5. Now we should get a bit more randomness out of the particles, and yeah, we do. And I think that's all we should need to worry about there for now. So now we're just going to add a bit more fields to it. So again, with the particle effect selected, we'll add a second turbulence. We'll drag it to just next to where the first one was. And this one we're going to make very strong and have the frequency down to very small. And we just mix up the phases so they're different from the other one. Actually, I might put that to 200 and set the attenuation at 0.5. Now we can see there's quite a big difference there. So we might put that to 5. There we go. Got a lot more randomness coming out. Even that's a little too big. So this is the most time-consuming part about doing particle effects. You need to fiddle around with attributes and all sorts of things until you get the right look you want. That looks pretty good actually. We can get some really nice effects out of that. So if we just do another test render, yeah, I think that might look good. Might put that to 0.2 though. How about the attenuation to 6.8? Yep, I think that'll serve us quite well. So now we'll keep on adding different fields. So I always put in a drag field. Yeah, and we'll put that next to our other fields. And we'll give it another volume sphere shape. And again, scale it up so it's enveloping the entire working part of the scene. Let's see how that looks. And what I normally do is I bump it up to max, the magnitude, and just see what I've got. And you can see it's sort of grouping things together based on where all the other stuff is. It's like it's grouping everything together. Now it looks kind of cool, and I think I'll just see what happens if I turn up the attenuation and make it 3 times that. So now we have sort of a fluidy type effect going. So again, could be useful, depending on what you want to get. Can certainly create a nice effect once we're rendering and putting everything together. Actually, I quite like that. I'm going to keep that actually. So now we've got our drag, we've got 2 turbulence nodes, and the last thing I'll put in for now is an air field. And this acts kind of like a fan. It just blows particles one direction or another. So again, I'll turn up the magnitude to about 50, attenuation down to 0.8, and right now the direction is set to going on the up axis, so it should be blowing everything upwards. So let's have a look. And you can see it is a bit. I'm going to bump it right up, just see if we can get the effect going. Yep, there we go. And you notice it's only blowing up over where the actual node is, so that's why we need the distance. So right now it's using a max distance. If I turn that off, it should affect the entire thing like it does. That's way too much, so I'm going to put that back down to 50 and see where we go. So even that's still way too much. So again, I'll try 1.5, should give it a slight wind. Maybe a bit more, 5. Oops, no, try 15. See, there we go, that's got a much nicer shape. put that to 12 and change the direction of 0.25 and minus 0.25. This should give it a nice diagonal spin to it. And there we go. And now we've got a pretty basic looking fluid effect in particles. And that's pretty much all I ever did to make the cool shapes in my videos. All the rest of the work comes from fiddling with Krakatoa's rendering settings and then doing post work in After Effects. So now that that's done, we'll go on to the next part, which is setting up a rendering solution and rendering out the full animation ready to composite and make a nice pretty video. So stay tuned for that.